Hi everyone, welcome. It's Friday, January 20th, 2023, and we have some really interesting people. I've got triple and quadruple threat people here today. They're actors, they're playwrights, they're directors, they're educators, they're artists, activists, they're social workers. They are interested in the world around us and how we can portray it to the public, and especially Sandra Laub, who is an actor, educator, and playwright, who will be premiering a one-woman monologue play in Westerly, Rhode Island, on what date?
Correct, April 29th.
On April 29th at the United Theater in Westerly, Rhode Island, on a topic of real interest, and we're going to get into that. What is it about? It's a hot topic today. What is the relationship of the American Jew toward Israel? That has been a question we've been asking for a lot of years, and especially now with what's happening in Israel, it has a lot of resonance, and I think Sandra has worked her way into something that should be very interesting and important, maybe controversial,
yes,
and thought-provoking. So let's get to it. Let me introduce Sandra Laub. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Sheila. So happy to be here.
So you're the actor and the playwright, but give us a little bit about your history, your background before. You're a teacher as well.
I'm a certified educator, a high school teacher at Charahoe High School in South County, Rhode Island. Have been doing that for 20 years, coaching drama, coaching Shakespeare. And that's terrific. I still enjoy that. But always I have been practicing my theater. I've been in shows, and I've developed my own shows in Rhode Island. Worked at the GAM, worked at Perishable Theater when it was around, the Brown Summer Theater, down in Rhode Island where I'm at, the Granite Theater. So I've always kept my hand in it, always got a show going at the same time as I'm doing my work. And in 2013, I was asked by the artistic director at Second Story Theater, which is no longer around, which we're all very sorry about. I was asked to play Golda Meir in Golda's Balcony, which was the Tony Award-winning show on Broadway about Golda and about the Yom Kippur War. And as you may know, there's a movie coming out. I think there are several movies coming out. So it's a topic that is in people's minds. She is an historic figure. We love Golda. We also have complicated feelings about Golda. She was a woman of her time, but also a visionary. And she got the country through that war, and that was a very difficult war. Of all the wars that Israel has been in, and we know that there have been plenty, she prosecuted that war in a way that kept the world from having a nuclear holocaust. That is the premise of that play. Yeah. Golda's Balcony is where she stood over the Dimona nuclear reactor, and William Gibson posits that she did not press that button, that she was saved at the last minute by war material sent by Nixon. And that was Kissinger and Nixon, so that's history.
So interesting
and
about
it was
that
wonderful.
Show.
Yeah,
because I saw that show with Tova Feldscher,
sure.
who really made that her almost signature show performance. And it's interesting, I watched an interview with her a while ago, and someone asked her, Helen Mirren is going to star in the new movie about Golda's Balcony. Yeah. She was so gracious. She said that she admired Helen Mirren, and if I were she, I'd be thinking, wow, why didn't they ask me? That's my show.
You know, Tova called me up because I've been touring this show since 2013. Word of mouth, synagogue to synagogue, community center to community center for benefits. And I always get the rights, of course. You have to, you must. And she found out, I guess, that I was doing this. And she called Samuel French at that time. Now it's Concord Theatricals. She wanted to know, who is this Sandra Laub? You know, what's she up to, what she's doing? And they told her, look, she's been doing this. She's got 12 performances already under her belt in various places in the States. And I guess she demurred. She said, okay, I guess so. And of course, we admire each other as solo performers, because it's a heck of a show to perform for 90 minutes alone on stage.
Exactly.
Facing the audience you know, locking eyes.
Right.
And I do it mostly in intimate gatherings. I do it in people's homes. I do it in on daises, at the bima even.
Okay.
So beginning there is when I really became aware that this was something special, that this was not only work as a theater artist that could be an opportunity for me to grow as a woman, as a performer, the complication that Golda feels, torn by family, torn by her political role, her power, and the fact that Golda really tried to do good. She tried to do the right thing. And I think I've zeroed in on that in the play. That is a very Jewish practice. You know, we call it tikkun olam, to try to heal the world,
repair
to fix
the world.
it, repair the world. And here Golda was with the world falling apart in front of her. Moshe Dayan had a nervous breakdown. She did not. She kept it together. And I think that story of her courage and her heart and her mental capacity is just extraordinary. So to play a character like that and to bring that into this play.
Is that a chai you're wearing?
It's
I'm
a
looking
chai.
at you, yes.
And in our slide, we'll see some slides. I have the chai in front of a stone that I picked up.
And tell everyone what a chai is.
The play that I wrote is called Picking Up Stones, an American Jew's moral dilemma. And so you'll see the stone.
So tell us what the chai represents.
So the chai is
people.
life. The chai is the hay that stands for life. And life is the most important thing to a Jew. And that's in the play as well. Beyond stones, beyond places, beyond historical land. This is ours, this is ours. No, you've got to honor human life.
And when we toast, we say l'chaim,
L'chaim.
to life.
That's right. That's right.
Let's turn to Emma for a while. Emma,
my director, director extraordinaire.
We want to give us a little bit about your relationship with Sandra, how the two of you hooked up, how you get to know each other in the arts community of this area, and what it means to be a director, especially of a play that's a one-woman model. How do you direct that?
Well, actually, we first met. I first came to the area, was working in Westerly, and you were working on a one-person show then.
Oh my
and
gosh,
I think you were looking for rehearsal space or something, right? And I, similar to your journey with Golda's Balcony, I had gotten the rights to do The Belle of Amherst, which was a Broadway show about Emily Dickinson that turned into a play I could tour and perform and have a whole different relationship with a character and with audiences, which morphed into my having several one-woman shows. I kind of learned about the structure and just that style of performance through The Belle of Amherst by William Luce, and have since developed several solo plays myself based on historical characters, and have started to venture into personal essay kind of writing as well. So I'm thrilled to, so we have performed our solo shows side by side at Emerson Theater Collaborative. I think that was 2019.
Tell us
2019?
All of the women characters who you portrayed in your shows.
So coupled with Golda's Balcony was the Woodhull Project, about which I've been on your show before, about Victoria Woodhull, who ran for President of the United States in 1872.
Right.
That's not a mistake. She ran in 1872. And so that just explores a whole bunch of social issues and women's issues through a contemporary lens, actually. I have her appear today and reflect on her life. I have also written plays about Gilda Radner, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and the current play I'm working on is inspired by the life of Julia Margaret Cameron, who was one of the first photographers. I'm not going to say one of the first women photographers. She was one of the first photographers, and did groundbreaking work in photography in the mid-1800s.
Okay, so that's all writing, performing. What is directing, and how do you come to that?
So, you know, like everything is kind of out of opportunity and necessity, right? So I've directed over the years through, whenever somebody needs a director, you just kind of step in through Plays for Living, where I was artistic director in New York for 5 or 6 years. At Art Reach here in Norwich, I direct some of the Second Step players and other theatrical projects we have, and just take on projects now and then. So I was really thrilled when Emerson Theater Collaborative and Sandy reached out to me to direct this piece, just to have the opportunity to work with Sandy, but to help develop and stage a one-woman show that would tells an important story, but also will have a future life, because Sandy's always getting herself out there touring. Yeah.
Okay, so back to Sandy. Let's go back into your childhood and your early days. What prompted your motivation to be an actress, to be a playwright?
Well, I grew up in New York. I grew up in the suburbs of New York. In fact, my elementary school, Michael Schwerner, who was part of the 3 civil rights workers who were killed in the civil rights movement. He was Jewish, of course. I think there was one other fellow who was also Jewish. That tradition of social justice in the Jewish community, and connected to my, at that time, a Reform synagogue, Temple Israel. The rabbis there were very much connected to the civil rights movement, to issues of social justice. They were against the Vietnam War. So this background of wanting to do the right thing, whatever political party you're in, but the claim for life, the claim for fairness, the claim for justice was sort of always in me, and brought out through my education. I went to Northwestern University. I then went to, and I was mentored by the wonderful Frank Galati, who just recently passed away. He was an amazing mentor teacher, along with Robert Breen. They were the developers of interpretation, the adaptation of material that is, not plays, extant plays, but material that the theater artist works on to perform. And so maybe you've got a narrator who's also a character, and maybe you look for work that is dramatic. So that was my beginning, learning from them. And Galati did Grapes of Wrath on Broadway, and just a beautiful human being and a humanitarian, a very humane person to work with. So Northwestern, then trained as an actor at American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And from there, tried my hand in LA, did Theater West, did a lot of theater there.
How did you mix your teaching with all of your work in the theater?
I wasn't teaching until I went back to New York.
Oh, okay.
So this was younger days, right? So when I went back to New York and I apprenticed and took some understudy roles at Circle Rep in Sheridan Square, right? Down in the Village. Oh gosh, got to meet Ed Harris, and when they were developing Fool for Love, some of those iconic off-Broadway plays. And then did my own off-Broadway plays and adapted Madame Bovary, and founded some theater companies in New York, did a lot of classical Shakespeare and Restoration comedies, and just got space wherever we could get space. And in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, you could do that in New York much easier. And we raised some money, and we got some write-ups and good reviews, and
so that's what we call off Broadway?
Off. That's right.
I live off Broadway in Colchester, by the way.
Not quite the same thing.
Right.
So, you're always working, and then you always have these other jobs that pay the rent. And, that's the through line. As an artist, it's tough in America to be any artist, but a theater artist. All the time it takes to write and perform and memorize, and also have a real job, pay the bills. And so I got a job. I began to teach they saw me, somebody at the New School for Social Research in the theater department saw me perform downtown in Alphabet City. I was with a guy who's still writing now. He did the Soap Myth. Do you know that? Do you know the play The Soap Myth by Jeff Cohen? He directed me. This is an amazing play. Ed Adner did it. It's about a survivor who tells the story, and it's not believed, of this myth of what the Nazis did to make soap. And it's a horrendous, horrible story, and you know it, right? So so anyway, I worked with Jeff, and then I started to teach at the New School and at other.
Isn't that where the Actors Studio was in that?
No, Actors Studio was different. New School for Social Research had the Eugene Lang College attached.
Oh, okay.
And, and there were acting studios everywhere.
Right.
In New York, so I taught in various places. And then I got married and had a baby. So my daughter is now, I know you have a son, Emma's going to be 29, it's hard to believe, in a couple months. So we came up to Rhode Island, and we rented an old 18th century farmhouse, and and I think we were there maybe half a year, and I wrote to Paula McGlasson, the chair of theater at URI, and said, hey, here I am, can I do something? And she hired me up as an adjunct theater professor, and I was there for 7 years. And then I did a show with Brown Summer Theater, and they saw me do that at Brown, and they said, hey, come on, we want you. So I was an adjunct theater professor teaching acting and voice and movement at Brown for several years. And Emma, at that point, she was climbing on the catwalks above us.
You're Emma, not me.
My Emma, not this Emma, my Emma, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So I took her with me, okay. The Emmas in my life are very dear. So you just keep going. Like Emma said, project by project by project, and you immerse yourself in it, and you hope you get, we're all used to being chief cook and bottle washer of our own projects, but thank goodness we have Emerson Theater Collaborative as a team. I reached out to the United Theater, which synergistically is doing a Jewish film festival in April.
Right.
And so my show will cap that off at the end of April. And, you hope that you gather good people around you who believe in the material.
All right, so tell us about the inspiration for this show, why you needed to write it, and what it's about.
Well, I think doing Golda and saying the lines that Golda says, she is an absolute Zionist. She is a, pickaxe and shovel and get yourself in the dirt and create something from the land where there was nothing Zionist. She escaped the Ukraine during the pogroms. She came to America first. She wanted to be in Israel, which of course at that time when she went in the early 20s was still Palestine. So she, along with Ben-Gurion, along with all of the pioneering Zionists who believed in a state for the diaspora of Jews around the world, this is pre-Holocaust even, to escape the pogroms. She's 6 years old, and she recalls the Cossacks coming to her door and her father nailing a board across the door to keep them out. So from the very beginning, there's been this question of survival. And how do we survive as a people, not even as a religion, as a people? And that's very interesting to me.
How do you survive and keep your ideals?
How do you keep your ideals? How do you keep your identity?
Now.
Exactly. And so this Jewish ideal of tikkun olam, do no harm, do good. And I see what's been happening in Israel over the past, my daughter did Birthright. Birthright is the trip that the kids, high school, college age, get to do for free.
Yeah.
Because Israel wants them there. They want them to see the land, they want them to see the people and be on the kibbutz and understand the heritage, and it's wonderful. And not but and, at the same time, there is this contested land, even from the very beginning, from 48.
I was going to say, do you think the conflict was just inevitable? I mean, that's a crazy...
In some ways, yes, Sheila, inevitable. The Palestinian people who lived on the land that was Palestine were there. Golda says there is no such thing as the Palestinian people, and she justifies it in the play. She says when they were shooting at us from the Golan, they were Syrians. When they were shooting at us from the West Bank, they were Jordanians. When shooting at us from Gaza, they were Egyptians, right? So I would say that line every night, and I'd think, is that true? There were people there besides the Bedouins, besides the Druze, who were Arab Israeli citizens. There were people there who were displaced. Now, the word is that they were paid for it, they were compensated, but you read, you research, and you hear about some awful things that happened.
Yeah, but in every great movement of politics, whether it's a war or reconfiguration of the states, people are going to get displaced.
People were displaced.
And you have to adjust to it. But there has been no proper adjustment over these years without, taking sides on either side.
There's been such rebordering and land taken in the 67 war. I mean, there were wars in 48 because there were 5 Arab countries surrounding this newly born country in 48 who didn't want them there. Syria didn't want them, and Egypt didn't want them, Jordan didn't want them.
But we had an international community that sanctioned it
Exactly.
and said, we're going to give the Jews this little postage stamp, this
New
New
Jersey,
Jersey-sized
maybe.
thing,
Yeah.
and you guys can have everything surrounding that.
Right.
Not enough? No, it wasn't.
No,
enough.
they went to war.
So obviously this, what we're just talking about now, engenders a million controversies, a lot of ill feeling on both sides, a lot of controversies within the Jewish community itself.
Yes.
The more liberal, the J Street people, the people who go to the other conferences, AIPAC, right?
Yeah.
It is a conflict that is growing instead of receding, and what's happening in Israel today is highlighting it even more. So, what were you trying to do with your monologue, with your play?
Bring it to an audience. Let it
do you have a
be
point
in
of view? Do you have a point of view? What's your point of view?
Well, come see the play and see if you determine a point of view. I do. I state that I am a progressive liberal Jew living in privilege in America. And
so
I live in a place
Jews
where there
in the United States. We didn't like Trump, but we still are American patriots, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Okay. So do you make that analogy with Israel? We got a government there that many of us maybe don't like, but
Well, I'll step in and say that, like, Sandy doesn't say that, but many of the issues that come up in the play, I think Americans, Jewish or not, can relate to, because we're going through a period of such great division. We're going through a period of violence where children are the targets, right? So there are those kind of parallels and similarities that I think the story is. It's specifically about Israel and a Jewish perspective and grappling with those ideals, but it's about humanity. And like you said before, when you're living in conflict, when you're living in this, how do you live your ideals at the same time?
But in every great work of art, isn't there universality?
Right.
Otherwise,
Yes,
it's not.
of course.
Otherwise, it's not great.
That's what we try for.
Right?
Yeah.
What happens when you recognize yourself as an oppressor or an occupier, which is a red hot button word, of course.
It
but
is.
what happens when you question the morality of being the occupier and this other, is the occupied, and you are not able to put yourself in their shoes? Golda's play is from the Jewish perspective, and of course from 48, we talk about the displaced persons from the Holocaust, who were wanting to, the remnants of a ravaged European Jewish society.
So I have an excellent suggestion for you. I don't know if you've thought of it. Are you going to have a talk back after the
Absolutely.
play? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to lead it?
We haven't discussed that yet, but
I'd be happy
we'll
to
make
get
sure.
involved because that's
Okay.
great. All right.
Oh, yes.
That would be terrific. That's
Yeah.
what's needed. But we have to be careful it doesn't get too, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to say anything more about it before you read us a few excerpts from your play?
You want to say anything?
What else would you
about
like
it?
to say to introduce?
we
I
covered
still
a
want
lot,
to know
just-
how you direct the play. Tell me what directing means in this case.
Yeah, so getting it on it, well, because it's a new piece, we're going to spend a period of time just working on the script and making sure that it's tight, that it's clear, that it's telling the story.
So you involved
and,
in some
you know,
additions,
so we're going to spend some time
edits
on the
to the
script.
writing a little bit. here
Yeah,
and
so
there?
we're going
we-
to work
yeah.
through the script for part of it, and then, as Sandy alluded to when she was talking about interpretation, and there are many characters in the play, even though it's Sandy's story. People that she talks to, almost like Anna DeVere Smith, or there's other characters in the play that Sandy will play, so we will spend a good amount of time finding those voices and physicalities of all those characters so that they're identifiable and their role in the story is clear, and just getting it on its feet so it's
and time-wise,
artistic and engaging.
investment of time. What does it take? An hour a week, an hour a day, 8 hours? How long does it take to get it into shape so that you can have a premiere and do it?
I started writing this version of the play in May of 22. A lot happened historically, and I had to keep updating. So I was this morning at 7 a.m., as you know, because I shared that edit with you. I'm still rewriting, and based on the notes I got from our first rehearsal, which was a 2-hour rehearsal, you got to meet at least 2 hours at a time. You're hoping for 20 hours maybe of rehearsal, and then we'll get into the space and we'll move it. But I'm, you know, it's a new script, even though I have incorporated some material from David Hare's play, Via Dolorosa. Do you know that play?
I've heard of it, yeah.
1998, his visit to Israel, his perspective, taking the Palestinians into account, whereas Golda's Balcony did not, of course. She dismisses them. So I thought it was time to bring that in as well, and also to bring in my own experience as a tourist, traveling to Israel with my now husband Marty, over 3 weeks in July of 2014, which was when Operation Protective Edge was happening. The Gaza War. 10,000 rockets fired into Israel from the Palestinian territories and the West Bank and Gaza. So all of that I've tried to weave into this play, which is about an hour, a little bit more.
A little bit over an hour.
More than an hour.
So like when it's you know, you're in a play with other actors, you can get that on its feet in 2 to 3 weeks, like, you know, part-time, right? 20 hours a week or something, because the burden doesn't all fall on a single person. But with a solo show, we have from now to the end of April. I won't be intently working with Sandy that entire time. One, because we each have other projects going on in the midst of that, but also because there's so much more to absorb, right? Sandy will need just some time to, even though she wrote it, to really learn the words and absorb the direction, create all these other character voices and physicalities, and you know, So you've chosen a couple of excerpts. You tell us either why you chose them or give us a little prelude to what you're going to say.
I think I've alluded to some of it, so I think I'm going to just start in. We decided on a couple of excerpts, and I'm going to try to say it because I am trying to learn this, so bear with me, and if I need to look down, I'll look down at my words, okay? So I am a progressive liberal Jew living in privilege in America. I live and work in a part of southern New England that doesn't have many Jews. So when I went to Israel, my first time, so far my only time, my first time in 2014, just as that summer's Gaza war was beginning, better known in Israel as Operation Protective Edge. When I arrived, I had this epiphany, as many Jews do when they disembark at Ben Gurion Airport, all at once, a visceral understanding of what it's like to be part of the majority in a nation that exists for us and anyone related to us, where the garbage men wear kippot, where 1 minute you're sitting in a cafe drinking a beer and the next running for shelter as the siren wails. And then as the all clear sounds, you go back to finish your meal. And the dancing begins again. Thank God for the Iron Dome. I traveled there with my husband, Marty. At that point, he was my boyfriend, partner, family didn't know what to call him. Anyway, we had 3 weeks in Israel, and I wanted to meet my distant cousins who were living there. They are descendants of my paternal grandmother's sister, Shifra. Shifra had, she made it out of Bukovina, which was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire well before the Nazis wiped everybody else out. Now, she went to Haifa early in the 20th century, and my grandma Paulina went to Queens, New York. My Israeli cousins embraced us like family, and we were invited to a bat mitzvah at the pretty beach town of Netanya. So I sit with my third cousin, approachable, amiable, Ami, and I ask him what he thinks about all this that's happening, that I'm seeing with the sirens and the rocket attacks and the immediate mobilization of all the soldiers. We saw, when we were at the Wailing Wall, 100 or more uniformed IDF young men and women with their guns dancing in a big circle in front of the Wailing Wall. It was a send-off before they were deployed, a blessing. And it was extremely confusing, thrilling, but scary. So I ask Ami, my cousin, and he says, every so often we have to do this. Every couple of years, we have to fight a war. So I don't know, at that point it reminded me of that line in The Godfather when Sonny says it's time to go to the mattresses. And that's an excerpt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So I was in Israel in 1988 for the 40th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
That was the beginning of the first Intifada. And our tour, which was supposed to include 100 busloads of tourists, was only a bus and a half.
Oh,
yeah.
And this has been happening. This is right.
So his line, every couple of years, and I'm getting the Israeli accent, and there are several Israelis that I have to get down. It's like they get used to it, and what toll does it take on a people to get used to war? I have another section in here where I visit my second cousin Dorit, whose teenage son sleeps on a mattress in the safe room, in the security room, in the bomb shelter, which is required in all new Israeli buildings. And he has PTSD. And I think she had PTSD. And I wonder about the whole country with PTSD. And yet, Israelis are so hardy and strong and energetic, and they're ba-ba-ba, and they're, you know, you look at them and you say, wow.
The spirit is overwhelming.
The spirit. And what have you accomplished in this country where there was nothing is amazing. And that achievement is amazing. And the cost. What is the cost?
Do you have another excerpt?
That's a question.
Do you want to see something else?
Sure, let's see. What do we got? So there's this section. So yeah, I've incorporated David Hare's trip to Israel in 1997. And when he gets there, he wants to speak with the settlers. And the settlers, it's still a very contentious part of society, those Jewish settlers who want more and more settlement of land that is within Palestinian territory. And there's skirmishes and there's fighting, and they are risking their lives to be there. But they believe in it. So I've got this section. I'll read you just the beginning of one. So David here meets with a couple, not with a couple of bearded zealots, but with Danny and Sarah Weiss, whose American-type home is littered with Delta timetables and yesterday's copy of the New York Times. And Sarah is in her 40s, open-faced. Danny is older, exhausted from his job traveling around the world as an agent for opera singers. They have 6 children. 3 is the minimum, some Israelis say. It's common knowledge in case you lose 1 or 2 in a war. So what Danny and Sarah value here, apart from what they are building, what they believe in, is the natural friendliness of what they call not the settlement, but the community. At dinner, they're both angry about the frosty reception that Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's controversial prime minister, even then, back in 1997, has just had from American Jews. American Jews are furious that he has yielded to the religious orthodox the right to decide who is a Jew. Jews in the U.S. say they loyally support Israel and send it huge sums of money. So what right does an Israeli have, an Israeli rabbi have, to decide who is and isn't a Jew? Marty and I were walking around Tel Aviv one Saturday morning. We walk into a shul, a synagogue. We're welcomed, and we hear the rabbi sermonize passionately on the American side of this issue. This rabbi is angry that he cannot legally marry a Jew and a non-Jew. And afterwards, we're walking around the streets discussing this touchy subject of intermarriage. Now, both Marty and I have in our family trees grandfathers. On my side, I have a kosher butcher, my grandfather. On Marty's side, he's got a rabbi. But the great-grandchildren of those definitively Jewish men are all involved with or married to non-Jewish partners. So Marty and I wonder who's going to say Kaddish for us when we're gone. That's one section.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
We've got some slides that we want to
Sure,
take a
let's
look
take a
at,
look.
and hopefully you'll describe what's going on with
Sure.
those. Can we see them? Okay, there that is. That's the flyer for the program.
Yep. So for right now, that is my phone number. We have no ticket prices on there, but those are the times, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. at the United, which is a fabulous venue
And
in
what day of the
Westerly,
week
Rhode
is
Island.
it? April 29th.
That's a Saturday.
It's a
Yeah.
Saturday? Okay.
2 p.m. and 7 p.m. in the gallery at the United.
Yeah, you know, we just started this week, so none of the promotional materials are final, but, you know, Facebook, Emerson Theater Collaborative, website, there'll be, look for publicity coming up with all
Okay.
the details.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go on.
So there is Shifra. I just mentioned her, right? Escaped from Bukovinia in Chernovitz was the town, actually. So there she is. There's my grandma, Paulina Laub, and there's my dad with his twin on his right, my Uncle Julie. They're the fat American healthy kids amongst what look to be pretty thin, and those are the European members of the family, right? So in
So your
Eastern
dad
Europe.
was born in Europe?
So my dad, nope, they made this trip when the boys
Oh, was
were
a
maybe
trip.
12 or 13.
Ah,
This
and-
is 1932, on the occasion of a wedding.
Oh, okay.
This is my grandma Paulina. She's green. My grandpa was Laub. I think he's in another slide.
Okay.
And they went by boat.
That's a huge trip to take in those days.
It was a huge trip for them. So they and only they survived.
Okay.
The rest of that family were probably shot in the forests north of Chernovitz.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next slide.
But Shifra made it to Israel. So there's my grandma Paulina. I remember her like that. I based some of Golda on her. Very strong woman. She would pluck the chickens that my grandpa, Max, he was the kosher butcher.
She looks a little like Golda Meir, actually.
Well, I'm telling you, it's all part of the family. So that's a picture maybe in Queens or maybe on Long Island where my cousins landed.
Okay, next slide.
So there's a map, and when Golda says when they were shooting at us from Egypt, when they were shooting at us from Gaza, they were Egyptians. And you can see why she would say that, because here's that tiny slice of Israel, and around are these Arab countries. You've got Egypt, you've got Jordan, you've got Syria, Lebanon, which, by the way, we were up at the Golan Heights touring the barbed wire there that divided up the kibbutz from Lebanon, the no man's land there. But that is a country surrounded, on one side you've got the sea, and on every other side you've got these, what Golda would call these hostile, and they were Arab nations. And you've got, different borders that have been drawn depending on what war has been fought. So in the 67 war, Israel retook, because they won that war in 6 days, retook land that had been given to the Palestinians, including Jerusalem. Jerusalem has been redrawn in many ways. When we were there, when Marty and I were there, it's an amazing city, of course, we know, with Armenians and Jews and Christians and Muslims all in this
Well,
old
when Jordan controlled the Dome of the Rock and the Wailing Wall, Jews could not go there.
Exactly.
Until 1967.
Then 67, they took it back, and that was so important to so many Jews. So,
okay. Next slide. Oh.
So this is just a slide that tells you that when I go to temples around the country, and I have played in Florida, and
is that Florida?
We did it in Sedona, in Emerson Theater West, right? But here we are in New York. I think this was New York, and this was great because this was an enclave in the Catskills where there were a lot of Holocaust survivors. And so I met in the audience of that show the survivor of a very famous partisan fighter, Etta, I'm blanking on her name, but yeah, that is me playing my show wherever anybody wants me to play at Golda's balcony.
Okay, next slide. Oh, there
and
you are,
there's a picture
Golda.
from doing it at the Bristol, Rhode Island courthouse turned theater. Nice. I refer to that in the play, so we can.
Oh, I see the law books behind you there, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. And she's on trial for risking the world in order to save Israel.
Right. Did she always wear the gloves?
Well, the gloves to visit. She did a lot of fundraising, in New York and Chicago, and she'd always go with her gloves. And that, I just want to acknowledge my mom.
Oh, nice.
That's my mother.
Is she with us still?
Who, she is not, sadly, of blessed memory.
Okay.
But she was almost my #1 fan. Marty and Emma and my mother, my #1 fans.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's Golda with the children of, could be of Cyprus, the children that she saved. She negotiated a way for the children to get out first from the post-Holocaust DP camps on Cyprus. And those children, unfortunately, some lost their lives in the subsequent wars, in the 67 war, in the 73 war.
Right.
But she was always, Emma, you're talking about children. That's a theme in my play. How do we value our children? I teach high school many of my kids in high school are doing their research reports on school shootings and how, you know, they've gotten worse and worse and worse, and we do our drills, and what's happening in our country to protect the most vulnerable among us.
Right.
So Golda was a protector of the most vulnerable.
Okay, next.
Dancing with emerging African nations. You know, I talk about how complicated Golda was. She was of her time, and she was an Ashkenazi Jew coming from Eastern Europe. And some people said she held a little bit of prejudice against Jews who were not from Eastern Europe, Sephardic Jews, from Spain, those who had to convert, right? In fact, the Black Panthers went to Israel to learn, and she couldn't figure them out. She just could not figure them out. She was not of that time. She was of an earlier time, but she literally danced with the people forming African nations in the late 50s and 60s and 70s.
Nice photo.
Yeah.
Next.
So here's the Yom Kippur War. The surprise war on the eve of Yom Kippur caught everybody by surprise in Israel. My cousin Dory, who was training to be a psychiatrist and was the child of a Holocaust survivor, went back to Israel, as many people who were in America went to Israel to fight in that war, if they could, because everybody was mobilized. So you can see the date, Monday, October, maybe it's the 9th,
1973.
1973.
Just 50 years ago.
Oh gosh,
50 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Yeah. And so here's this amazing moment when Ariel Sharon, who I call the hero in Golda's balcony, he proves to be less than a hero as we go further on in history, sparking the Second Intifada. But here he figured out a way to get Israeli tanks to float on rafts to get across the Suez Canal to defeat the Egyptian army, which was ingenious and a miracle, and saved Israel right before Nixon sent all the war material, so that she didn't have to press that button.
Next slide. Beautiful.
Yeah, and there's the Temple Mount. So there, the Dome of the Rock, Al-Harem al-Sharif, a holy place for two peoples, the Jews and the Muslims. It is where, supposedly, Abraham was prepared to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice to God.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And
the Wailing
the
Wall.
Wailing Wall.
Right? And that was free and open to us. So that's where we saw, and I think I have a picture later that's part of my collection. We were there later, and you'll see the light is different with the Israeli soldiers in this area where, where the barriers are. They weren't right up against the Wailing Wall, but they were dancing in a circle in that space. It was incredible to watch.
Right.
And singing, yeah, with their guns. Yep, so that's the women's side. It's still divided, partitioned.
Still controversial.
Which is so
I was in
controversial.
Israel in 2012, and we took a busload of people for the Shabbat Friday night services at the Wailing Wall,
Yeah.
and Anat Hoffman, who was leading the charge for women to have the right to say the prayers aloud at the Wailing Wall, was arrested. It was a very exciting evening. And they've never 100% resolved it. They tried to, and Netanyahu and the government turned their back on the compromises that were made.
So there it is. That's my photo of these Israeli soldiers, and you can see them in uniform, and you can see the guns strapped on them, led in song and dance, literally about to be deployed for Operation Protective Edge in July of 2014.
So that's a tradition every time they're about to go off?
Who knows, Sheila? I have no idea.
Okay.
It caught us by surprise, and it was as if they were being blessed and sent off to the borders. It was like it was like we used to do at camp. I went to a Jewish summer camp, and we played the Maccabees, right? The Maccabee games. And there was a lot of spirit, and it reminded me of that, except this is playing for real. Here, of course, lives were lost.
Right.
85 Israelis were lost in Operation Protective Edge.
And look how young some of them are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Next slide.
Yeah. And so there are my cousins. This is Vika and Gila at their home in the Moshav. And there's my husband Marty.
Explain what a Moshav is.
Moshav is this a little less communal than a kibbutz. Moshav are organized places where Jews live in community, but they each have their private residence. Right. Yeah.
Okay, next.
And he's showing us the maps. And there's Vika's 2 daughters. So the one who has the longer hair, on my right it would be in the picture, she was in the IDF, she was in the Israeli Defense Force, and she went into a special intelligence unit that summer interrogating Palestinians. And it caused her harm. It really caused her harm, and so I write about that a little bit in the play. But that was a wedding, that was a happy time. So we had bat mitzvahs, and we had this amazing wedding that we went to that was on a kibbutz, and there were Israeli dignitaries there. It was really cool.
Okay, next slide.
So this is a controversial place in the north. As you go up past Sfat into Galilee, which is the north of Israel, is the Temple Barem or Birim for the Arabs. It's from the Roman era. It was pretty deserted. This is a picture that I took, I believe, and it is, I didn't know it at the time, but it is adjacent to a destroyed Arab Christian village. And I only learned that afterwards.
Okay.
But this was an amazing place in the middle of a forest. And there was nobody else there, you'll see, as we advance.
Okay. Next slide.
Yep. So these were the walls that I believe were part of that destroyed village, the Arab village, which has no plaque on it. There's nothing to tell you what was there.
Okay, next.
Yep. So that's where I'm climbing and I'm exploring, and I have no idea at the time when I was taking the picture. But I look back and I do research for the show, and I find that this was a 19th century village that was destroyed in the 50s by the Israeli army.
Yeah.
And so there's that plaque that is evidence that, yes, this was the place that we were, Barem National Park. And that's just about the temple from the Roman era, and there's nothing there about the Arabs who might also have been there. Yeah, and there's Marty.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's what I think were the tumbled down stones of the destroyed village. And from afar. Yep.
Okay. Oh, there he is again.
There he is again. Yeah. So it's fascinating, as you know, to be in these places where the stones, the rocks are there. And you are walking on places where people trod 2,000 years prior, and you imagine what that must have been like.
It's so hard to appreciate in America. We go back to 1600, I mean, not 2,000 years ago.
Exactly.
You know.
And that's why we travel. That's why we love to travel. And I know that people have pictures just like this.
I know.
And so I wanted to write a play about it.
Okay, so let's summarize. So Emma, summarize what we're going to, what the experiences we're going to take away from Sandra's play.
Well, I think I hope audiences will come and question their own choices around choosing life and their ideals and when it gets to a place of violence and division, how do we heal that?
Okay, final summary, Sandra.
Well said, Emma. Thank you. Yes, I hope people come. Yes, I hope that they contribute to the talk back and the discussion, and that we all do our research, whether that it's about our own families and where we come from, or whether it's the places that we travel to and we want to discover who was here before us, because we are only standing on the shoulders of people who have gone before.
Okay, great. So thank you both for coming today, and we're going to see everybody on Talk Back next time, and keep Sandra Laub and Emma Palzeret in mind for the show coming up April 29th in Westerly. See you next time. Bye. Okay.